Welcome to the Inclusiveship Show, the place to get practical insights to make inclusion happen in the business world. My name is Thais Compoin. I'm your host, and today I'm absolutely delighted to have here with me Alvine Tremoulet. Alvine is inclusion lead at Pfizer, where she specifically supports the Global Women's Council and the Diversity and Inclusion Council Europe. Alvine is also an active member of the Healthcare Business Women Association, and she was born and raised in Cameroon, Central Africa. Alvine, thank you so much for making the time to be here, and a warm welcome to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thais. It's really, a pleasure to be interviewed by you. So it's a real pleasure for me. Thank you.
Thank you. And my first question for you, Alvine, is how do you define inclusion and diversity?
Well, this is a question I'm receiving, often because, of course, depending on the countries, people don't know the difference between diversity and inclusion because the culture, the education, so many things are, different, and even the social context. And to make it much more general and to make it really understandable very quickly. And I take the example of Brenna Meyers, who is an expert in diversity and inclusion in US, she says that diversity is like inviting someone to the party, and inclusion is really inviting that person to dance. This is a definition of these both concepts that I really like, and that's a definition that talks to many people when I talk to them as well.
Yeah, I really like this definition as well. It's a very moving definition, isn't it?
Yeah. Exactly, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
And Alvine, what's your killer argument to convince people of the value of inclusion and diversity?
Well, I have many of them. There's one that I find that talk to people is when I talk about extraversion versus introversion. I found that when people are really struggling to understand the concept, I say, well, because it seems like they recognize themselves as whether they are introverted or extroverted. Then when I talk about imagining being in a room, in a meeting room, for example, having a meeting, and making sure that those who are not saying something, is it because they are introverted or because is it because they are shy? It's just that if there's someone extroverted in the room, that person has to make sure that everyone in the room or in the meeting room has a chance to take, to say something. Make sure that every voice is heard during a meeting, for example. And when I take that example of introversion versus extroversion, this is where I see people reacting. I can see that in their eyes, the way they're, okay. And then, so I see them, identifying themselves. And because I also think that this is a topic that is not uncomfortable, because sometimes when we are talking about diversity and inclusion, there are many topics that will be, uncomfortable. So I avoid starting by, concepts that are not comfortable. Yes.
Yeah, I find that so smart, Alvine, because maybe one of the reasons why so many inclusion and diversity initiatives don't get traction is because people don't feel part of it, or people who think they belong to the majority, they don't feel part of it.
Exactly.
And by talking about diversity in personality types, it's a very smart way to involve everyone, because
exactly, yeah,
you can,
because I also tend to be, because I'm new, I have to say, in this position, I try to not judge people. I really try to understand that they are not at the same level of understanding this concept that are new in certain companies, in certain cultures. So and when I talk about introversion, extroversion, this is something that everyone will understand. So I start there, and then involving in the discussion, I will be, adding other examples of diversity and inclusion, but I really tend to start by introversion and extroversion to make it clear at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I will have other examples, of course. Something else I tend to use is the example of the Hidden Figures, this movie. Taking the example, this is a true story actually, of these African American women in the 60s who worked at NASA. They were calculators. So I think this is also a very nice celebration of diversity and inclusion in the workplace.
Great. And what's the most effective initiative that you've ever taken to drive inclusion and diversity? As I said, I'm new on the topic. Although I have a genuine passion on the topic. Something I'm really, really proud of is that I work, for example, in France on to enable really colleagues internally to have a better work-life balance. And we have, for example, in France, parents, whether they're men or women, who have places in nurseries. And I think this is something we work in Pfizer France to really enable parents to better manage their work-life balance and harmony. I will say it's not a balance; it's a harmony. Yeah. I have a preference in terms of terms. I like the concept of work-life integration, because nowadays also, we are all the time we are integrating lots of aspects of our lives in a whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
We are like a whole being. In work and private life, these are just different pieces of the puzzle.
Yes. So this is something, for me, this is important because I see colleagues who are no more going to think about how they're going to, we know how difficult it is in France, for example, to have a place for our children, for our young children. So this is definitely something I'm proud of.
And what's the most common objection that you get in this area?
Something that comes to my mind very quickly is, when we talk about unconscious bias, we all have, and when during discussions with internally, when sometimes we're trying to make people internally or even externally, of course, trying to make people understand that we have bias, and then we have to take into account our bias before taking any strategic decision. And I still have comments like, well, when I have my gut instinct, I have my gut instinct. So I believe what I believe. So I don't know why I should change my mind when I strongly believe something. So this is an interesting discussion and resistance that I can sometimes have.
And how do you respond to that?
I take examples, of course, of a time where we making, for example, someone who is a manager. I make him understand that as a manager, he will, for example, have someone that he will prefer, and that he's not conscious about this preference of that person. And of course, this is his or her gut instinct to know that that person is, maybe the best, and just making that person realize that because you are preferring that person and that other people might see that can have a bad impact for your performance, for your engagement. These are among the kind of answers I give, to kind of address or tackle these resistance.
Yeah. I like to tell people that actually there's a lot of research that shows that we make our opinions about people very quickly, isn't it? It only takes a tenth of a second. And that those opinions, they are not based on really rational arguments. It's completely irrational. So maybe we are taking a bad decision just by following our first impressions or our gut feelings. It's not that gut feelings are always wrong. It's just that you have to check them, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And something, of course, I really like about unconscious bias is the fact making and explaining to people that we have like two systems. Our brains has two systems. A system that is very fast and another one that is slow. And, really making them understand that, well, with the fast system, well, many times we're making mistakes. And with a very slow one, because we take time to reflect, then we're just making, the right decision.
Mm-hmm. And I guess, coming back to this topic of objections, Alvine, I find myself that there is a very common objection that it's not always voiced. People don't always talk about it. Although more and more people are becoming vocal about this topic, is the fact that for some people, when you say inclusion and diversity, you are going against the meritocracy principle. You are favoring some people who belong to a minority instead of treating everybody fairly. Is that something that you experience as well? And how do you respond to that?
Well, this is something personal, of course. I really don't want to be promoted or to be advanced in my career only because I'm a woman or only because I'm a Black woman. So, on the other hand, I don't want to be, stopped because of that. But really, I want, us to be equal in every single opportunity that we can have, whether in a company or even externally. We should be all treated at the same level. And it's really about making sure that we all have the same opportunities, no matter of our differences, whether these differences are visible or non-visible. Just, being at the same level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't know if you've seen I've just read actually this week the last report that came out by McKinsey and Lean about women in the workplace in corporate America. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking about this report because one of the key insights is that the reason why we are not progressing as fast as we could when it comes to diversity is the fact that they are not aware of the problem or the barriers that when you are different, people who are different may encounter on the way. And there is a specific chapter about women of color and specifically Black women that face so many barriers, but yet most people are blind to those barriers. So if you don't see the problem, why would you tackle the problem? So raising people's awareness about the obstacles to equality.
Yeah, exactly.
It's important.
I come back to the unconscious bias. So there are things that I will see. There are things that a disabled person will see. There are things that you will see that I won't see. For example, there are things that I will see that you won't see. So, and this is also based on my experience. And I really tend to try to really explain things and avoid judging people, because I'm mindful to the fact that they don't know. So I have to explain and I have to be mindful to the fact that it's because they don't know sometimes that they just have certain reactions. So it's just a matter of taking time, pausing, and really explaining. Yes, I'm not saying that it's easy, of course. But I have to say that I am, lucky enough to grow and in a company that really enabled me to do so, because I have a non-traditional background, I have to say, and working at Pfizer, it's a privilege because I've been growing in this company. Company really enabled me to grow as a person, and have the chance that my voice is heard whenever I have and as long as it's respectful, I think it's fine. It's a culture of my company, but everything depends on the culture of other companies. But I'm lucky enough to be in a company where the culture enabled me to say things when I feel I have to say them. So.
And in your opinion, Alvine, what's the most effective way to deal with non-inclusive behaviors?
This is a tough one. I think, first of all, you have to stay calm. So when you have to stay calm, because, being aggressive when you are in front of non-inclusive behaviors is not where you're going to advance the topic. Really pause, and when it's the right time, you just tell to someone that something that he or she has just said is non-appropriate. And I'm coming back to the culture of a company. In my company, when things are not appropriate, well, we are allowed to say, look, what you just said is not appropriate. Look, this is our culture. We are not allowed. It's not permitted to behave like this or like that. So culture is one thing. So, and then of course our personality. We really have to stay calm and address it. Have a honest, sometimes difficult conversation, but remaining calm and taking someone, have a face-to-face meeting with someone and really taking time to tell that person that, well, you just had a non-appropriate, behavior. This is non-inclusive. So I think we can talk about everything. It's only the way we are talking about things. Mm-hmm. As long as honest and respectful, we are able to talk about everything. But it has to be respectful for me.
Yeah, and I remember having been once in a Pfizer building where there was, by the elevators, I could see the company's values there. Mm-hmm. And it seems, mm-hmm. and I think there was I don't know if you can remind us, Alvine, there was a sentence in your core values that talked about that referred to the fact no jerks. Yes. Yeah, and I thought I thought that was the most straightforward way to tell people we have to respect each other here. No jerks. Yes. So no jerks. Yes. Can you tell us a little bit about this? So no jerks is part of Pfizer's corporate values. It's there for everybody to see.
Yeah, so this is definitely one of the core values of Pfizer. So no matter who you are in the company, it's not because you're, no matter who you are, we have to respect each other's. And there's also, we have the no jerk, and then we have a straight talk among these values. So whenever there's an issue, we have to take time to discuss in a mm-hmm. respectful way. And when we say no jerk, there's certain behaviors that are not permitted in the company. And yes, and maybe that's also why I was talking about being able to say things when I think it's important to say them. So, mm-hmm. That's because it's part of our culture, yes.
And what was the most valuable piece of advice you've ever been given in the inclusion and diversity space?
What is the most valuable advice? I think something I've been is to remain myself. Working on this topic, I tend to not put too much the fact, and I have to say that, the fact that I'm Black. And someone told me once that just be yourself. do not hide who you are, because this is what you are. So at the same time, I don't want people to feel that I am passionate, that I'm doing that only because of that. Just to remain myself, and yes, to remain myself, basically. I don't know what else to add to that, yes. Because it's part of me.
It's part of you. Yeah, it's important to be role models, isn't it? If we are preaching about inclusion and diversity and feeling valued and free to be yourself, no matter what. I think it's important to walk the talk. Yeah. And so this is the piece of advice that you've received. In which piece of advice would you give to anyone starting or revamping their inclusion and diversity strategy?
I will say that that person should really learn. I had the opportunity to go back to school. I was in Sciences Po Paris for an executive master in communication, and I had a chance to really learn a lot more on social sciences like psychology, even communication, the way being strategic when talking about diversity and inclusion, because it should be seen as an added value for our management, and it should be thought on a strategic point of view. It's not something that we're doing in addition. It's really something that is embedded in our internal strategy, as finance can be, as HR can be, of course, D&I is, but it should be seen as a strategic imperative for a company, and not something that we'll do. It's not a nice to have, so it's just something that should be seen on a strategic point of view, really be thought strategically. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Not a nice to have, a must have instead of.
A must have, yes. It's a must have. And we have to learn, and something that we have to learn deeply to be able to talk about much more clearly, so that people can see the benefits for them, for the companies, and because I think that the company is really a mirror of our society, so and has a role to play.
And what do you see trending now? What's the topic of the future when it comes to inclusion and diversity? The topic, or maybe a new approach? What is coming up?
I think what I see is that people are talking more and more about millennials, of course. How do we attract them, and how do we retain them? Because I think this generation is really about, they know what they want and what they don't want. And if values of a company is not, in line with themselves, they're going to quit. So I think it's also, they are the future. So how do we make that this future is taken into account, today? It's basically preparing the field, preparing our companies. So I'm lucky to be in a company where we're already, preparing. We have started with a journey, as it is for many companies, I guess. But really prepare the future for the millennials, who are the company of tomorrow. Yes.
Yeah, I also find that business leaders, they tend to listen more to diversity and inclusion initiatives when we are focusing on this future and the millennials. It opens up the interest as well in the business.
Yes. Yeah, and of course, and also something, I talk about millennials, and even globally we have these sustainable development goals by the UN. We are talking more and more about inclusive economy. So we have to take into account about the world that is in a society which is vulnerable and uncertain. So, yes.
Alvine, it's time for us to wrap up. Now it's been fast, eh? Goes quick.
Yeah.
Tell us, do you have any favorite books or TED Talks or quotes that inspire you and that you could share with us?
Oh my goodness, I have, of course, I've read many books, and also I suggest to read your book.
Thank you.
Succeed as an inclusive leader. There's one quote that I really like. It's from Nelson Mandela, who says, "I never lose. Either I win or learn." And the topic of diversity and inclusion is really about learning about others, because others, of course, human beings are complex, but at the end, the human capital is the one that really gives us the must today. So it's really about learning.
Great. Thank you so much, Alvine, for coming to the Inclusiveship Show. A pleasure talking to you. Really inspirational.
A pleasure for me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thanks everybody for watching. It would be great to find out what you find, most inspirational in this conversation. Please leave your comments with your key takeaways. If you like this episode, like it, share it, subscribe to my channel. And if you want to learn more about me and my work in supporting companies on their inclusion journey, please visit declicinternational.com, DECLIC international.com. I hope to see you in the next episode. Until then, embrace differences and make a difference. Thank you. Bye. Thank you, Alvine. Bye-bye.
Thank you.